be recording from now. The creepy little voice. Where are you calling from today, Stefan?
From Berlin.
From Berlin, okay.
And it's actually nice-ish again. It was last 2 weeks of August were pretty bad. And everyone was like, oh my God, where's the summer going? But then now the last couple of days, a little bit better.
Nice.
So,
nice.
But the German election is coming up, and that's very, very interesting and exciting.
Yeah.
And it's the sort of the center-left party was, I think, at 15% a couple of months ago, and they went to over 25. And the center-right conservative party went from the same in the other direction, and everyone's like, oh my God, what's going on? Very
it's
exciting,
going in the right direction for a change.
Well, I mean, the weird thing is the coalition options are really difficult now, because the traditional power making is not the same anymore, and there's a sort of more left-wing party that wants to coalition with the Greens and the center left, and there's and then there's the liberals, who are kind of the potentially the kingmaker. And the thing is, whatever you vote for, you don't actually know what kind of deal you get until the coalition stuff happens afterwards, which is kind of weird, or at least for me, it feels somehow undemocratic, right?
The political system is so different to the UK. We may as well be a two-party system. It's so interesting though. It's probably better in some ways, more democratic.
But the good news is we have no populists in the running. At least not with like a very good chance of winning a significant amount of the votes. So.
It's gonna be strange though, because with Angela Merkel stepping down, I didn't realize she's been in power for 15 years, like 16. How long has it been?
Actually.
16 years.
16
it's such
years.
a long time.
Yeah, she's outdone like a lot of other world leaders.
So long.
But now people are asking a lot of uncomfortable questions. What about digitalization? I think Germany is the second last country, just ahead of Romania or something, in terms of broadband. So if you're not in a big city in Germany, you have no 3G, you have no broadband. And the lovely politicians didn't do anything about this in the last couple of years. It's pretty bad.
Which is surprising as well, given it's Germany, and you're usually pretty good with a lot of stuff. It's
a big country at the end of the day, right? And they messed up the 5G, the 3G sales. They sold the licenses at a very high price. And then in the end, they didn't have the rules that you have to have proper coverage. So the operators just said, hey, I paid so much for the license. It's fine to just put a few big ones. Good blend them, right?
Great solution. Also, hi to those who have joined. Welcome to today's masterclass. We're having a political debate about the German elections. Welcome. And also hi everyone who, none of you have seen me before. I'm Julia. I'm the face behind the emails that you've been getting for the last 3 months. So nice to meet you all. We're going to give it a few more minutes after past, just to give people a chance to join. But here with the lovely Stefan. Stefan, who's a really dear friend of Future VC, has joined last year from his honeymoon. So I'm very glad that this time you're in Berlin. Got me checking the weather as well. We've had basically like torrential rain this morning, which was not ideal, but it's actually all right now, which is fine. We had the same thing. We've had absolutely no summer in the UK. We had 1 week of summer, which was last week. And I wasn't here. I was somewhere else where it was really cloudy and rainy. So I managed to miss the only week we had. Great planning from our side.
Awesome. I think we have 19 people now.
Yeah, so we'll give it another couple of minutes.
By the way, I can only see you at the moment, Julia.
Yeah, it's a webinar, so you'll
That's
only be
a webinar setup. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, you'll only be able to see me.
But
the Q&A is
ask
open.
A question, they can ask in the chat only, or also on the screen.
They can ask in the chat, and you can also just adapting it to everyone. You can ask questions in the chat, and you can also ask questions in the Q&A. And if you ask questions in the Q&A, everyone will be able to see each other's questions, and you can upvote questions.
But we don't do video with the participants, right?
No.
Okay, perfect. Good.
Yeah. So yeah, but I'll repeat this again before we start. But yeah, everyone, if you see a question that's already been asked and it's in the Q&A, just upvote it rather than put it in twice. Means it's much more likely to that we'll get to it before the end of the session. Cool.
And another maybe stupid question, but if I ask people to give a thumbs up, then I see this in the participant list, right?
Do that. Yeah.
Can people try the thumbs up, please? I'm not sure. Is it even possible to thumbs up?
Okay,
yeah, no, I can see
up.
it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Yeah.
Okay. You probably can't do thumbs up, but you can raise your hand.
Nice. Awesome.
Oh.
Excellent.
Two best select channels. Okay. We're a minute past, and I know we've got a lot that we're going to cover, and we are now recording. So if anyone else can catch up, they can do later. Hi again to everyone, and again hi to those of you who weren't here earlier when I introduced myself. My name's Julia. I'm the project manager at Future VC. You've all received many emails from me before now, but this is probably the first time quite a few of you are seeing my face. So hi, I'm probably going to be leading quite a few more of these sessions from now on, taking over from Seb. Welcome to today's Future VC Masterclass. We've got Stefan here. He's going to be talking about financial models and also, importantly, walking through cap tables, which I know is quite often a bit of a mystery to quite a few of the cohort. So please do, as we were just saying, ask any and all questions you have, either in the chat or in the Q&A box down below. I was just saying, if someone has asked a question that you want to ask, upvote it rather than put it in twice. And yeah, it sounds like there's going to be some interaction, so have that raise hand button ready as well at different points throughout the session. But in the interest of time, without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Stefan.
Awesome, Julia. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Last year was a pleasure with the previous cohort, so I'm excited to be back and share some of my learnings and some insights from being a VC and a founder, and having worked with many founders in the meantime to kind of try to figure out how to talk to VCs. So without further ado, let's quickly go. My background, I studied computer science and then worked in management consulting at McKinsey, and then switched to the startup world and worked for StylistPick in London, an e-commerce company in 2013, 2014, quite a long time ago by now. And learned the ropes of being in a startup there, worked a little while at Citymapper, some of you may know, and then I switched sides to become a VC at Wellington Partners, a sort of Munich originated early stage venture fund. After spending 2 years there as an associate and principal, I moved back to Berlin. This was living in London, and I joined the founding team of ZenJob, which has now raised over $50 million, I think. And I didn't stay there for too long. I left the founding team after about a year, and I have since been doing a variety of consulting and other things. One with the Factory Berlin, which is a co-working space here in Berlin that's trying to figure out how corporates and innovation can work together better. And most recently, I've spent quite a bit of time and energy on my side project, Innovators Room, which is a community of founders and VCs and investors and corporate innovators. And it started as a VC jobs newsletter that some of you may know, and then it was for a while an Instagram experiment, and then it became a LinkedIn experiment, and now it's a bit less of an experiment, more of a thing, and it's a Slack community with 4,500 people in it, and I think there's over 800 VC investors. So yeah, we talk about jobs, we talk about events, we talk about learning things similar to a session like today, and the purpose is to meet other people that have similar goals as you. So would love to see you all there if you're not already there. Today, we're going to talk about cap tables, but before we go into details about cap tables, I'd like to share a few things that I think are quite important to know about what happens kind of before the conversation about a cap table starts. And specifically, that is when you discuss valuation and investment amount with founders as an investor. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationship between funding, valuation, and ownership that you as a VC can take. And we're going to talk about phase thinking to kind of look ahead into the next round, to think about how much money the company will need or how much you need to ask for the company to have in kind of in dry powder in the bank after the round. And we're going to talk about the cap table basics itself, what it looks like. And we're going to talk about some events of a company, like a priced equity round, a convertible note, or maybe some ESOP if you have time at the end, to look at how the cap table changes. And the main idea is that we want to make sure that, you know, as future VCs, you understand both the founder and the VC side a little bit. And I think, you know, if you've been following Twitter and places like that, you know that, you know, there's some VCs that behave pretty badly, and you definitely don't want to be one of those. So, you know, I will try to share some of the things that bad VCs do, so you can learn in not to do them, obviously, not to do them yourself, please. Finally, we can talk, if you have time, a little bit about whether you have any experience using SaaS tools rather than just a spreadsheet to keep track of the equity movement, etc. So last night I suddenly had a hugely painful chest and cough. I did a Corona test already. I don't think I have Corona, but if I get a cough, then I probably need a short break and drink something. So bear with me if that's the case. But in the meantime, I'm going to try to go through that content, and I'm going to try to keep it a little bit interactive. So it's a shame that I cannot see you in person, but I guess for the right reasons, we have turned that off. But I hope you can engage in the chat and in the Q&A section that I'm also monitoring here. So there's one question about VC financial analysis in an interview. I think we should park that question for later. And there's a question about Innovators Room that we can talk about later as well. Now, the first question that I have, it took me quite a long time when I was a VC to really understand the difference between pre-money and post-money valuation. So I'm curious, how many of you would be able to explain this to someone else? Can you write yes in the chat, please, if you can explain the difference between pre and post-money valuation, just so I get a sense of how deep I should go on this thing. Awesome, perfect. So some people have an idea, some people not so much yet. The way I like to think about it is that the pre-money, as it says, pre is before and post is after the round. So if you receive $1 million in cash, or 1 million euro on this slide, the way I like to remember it is that the moment the money hits the bank account, your company hasn't changed, right? So before you even receive the money as a founder, you negotiate with a VC. Here, I hope you can see my mouse. You negotiate how much the business is worth before the investment. And then when you as a VC send the 1 million euro to their bank account, the business itself hasn't changed, but the valuation has, because the company now is the same 4 million euro company, plus they have 1 million additional cash in the bank account. So as you know, there's a lot of games to be played with founders about talking about valuations and being vague about, is it a pre or post money valuation that you are handshake agreeing on during the investment process. And yeah, so that's why it's important to understand that. This is a slide that I've taken from another deck that is helping founders get ready for fundraising. And the idea is that just before you get ready to talk to VCs and, just before you get ready to call back the VCs you've already been having coffee meetings with to say, hey, now it's time to fundraise. At that moment, you need to have the following things in place. And it's kind of obvious, like you want to know who your investors are, your ideal investor, you want to know how well you know them. And what I tell those founders is that they should really combine all the meetings with investors like you in a short period of time to game your FOMO a little bit, right? So if you figure out that other VCs are looking at the same deal, most VCs start running just because another VC is looking at it. And, you know, I think the smarter founders, they know this and they can game this a little bit. Now we come to the pitch decks, you know, if they presented a demo day or if they're presenting, they're just sharing an email teaser or a deck that they show in a meeting. That's all pretty obvious. Now, the first two interesting things here is the target round. So what should the investment round look like? And what should the pro forma cap table look like? So founders should ideally have these things ready before they go into the sort of high-speed fundraising phase with you. Then they need to have their main KPIs ready, maybe a cohort or a customer acquisition cost, customer lifetime analysis. And I also highlighted here the 18-month budget and a 5-year high-level plan. So the 18-month budget is, in my mind, a little bit more like the, you know exactly how much you're going to be spending on certain things month by month for the next 1.5 years. And then you have also a bigger sort of flexible model that shows you what could the company look like in 3 or 5 years, or even later, in terms of how many cities are you going to be in, etc., as a company. And, I tell those founders, hey, you need to have your follow-up templates ready so that you can really quickly get back to VCs like you during that pitch phase to create even more momentum. Now, if you receive the target round amount, so let's say they want to raise 500K, or probably today more 5 million, and the pro forma cap table and the 18-month budget, what are you going to do with that? So we're going to take another small excursion here. You see here 3 things. Yeah, you see the funding round, or the round size, and the post-money valuation, and the ownership or the dilution during that round. By the way, if I'm using any terms like dilution or something and it's not exactly clear, just type it in the chat and I can explain it in more detail. And by the way, for this, we're only talking about a equity round. So Tej has a question: does this checklist vary with investment stage? So let's maybe briefly go back here. I would say this list is probably the same for most investment rounds. The more advanced you are, the more money you will receive as a company, as a founder. So you'll probably need to have more thorough analysis and more slides to explain everything in detail. But in general, I would say this is kind of how most founders should prepare themselves in an early stage fundraising setup. I think if you're raising like many millions, then it's more of an investment banking approach, more private equity approach. It's more like discounted cash flow, etc. So we're not gonna cover this. Great, great question, RIG, for the valuation. We're gonna get to it in a second. So what most founders don't understand, and I'm curious to see later if all of you already understand this, is that when you discuss between a founder and an investor, there is this notion that a lot of VCs want to have around 20 to 25% of the company after the round. And why is that? I think you had a session already on VC fund dynamics. Yeah, as a fund, if I put $1 million in a company, then I need to own a certain percentage for it to make sense. When the company becomes a $1 billion company, I need to have a certain payback. And so the reality is that VCs have a business model, as you know. And so that business model kind of means that when they invest in a company, they need to own a certain percentage. And I would not, I'm not 100% sure if these 20 to 25% are still the most up-to-date number. Be interesting to do a survey with funds at the moment, given how the valuations are rapidly increasing at the moment. Maybe that percentage is also slightly different now. But I think at the end of the day, if you look at the valuation increase game that VCs play from when they invest to the time that they exit, you need to have a certain multiple, and that needs to be a significant chunk of the company. So I guess even if that 20 to 25% here may not be exactly what people expect today, I think many funds that I know, they still have some kind of thing that they say, well, if we invest in a business, we will at least want 10% in ownership. Now, what does that mean? Sorry, just to finish this point here. The amount that the VC owns after the round is the same as the dilution that the founders experience. So in a way, and we get to this at the end of the session today, that when you look at the percentages with each fundraising round, you don't really give equity away because you create new shares as a founder. So when you create new shares, you make the pie bigger. So everyone keeps the existing shares there, but you make the pie bigger. And at the end of the day, you don't own as much of the pie anymore. And that is called dilution. So if your new investors in a round get 20% of the shares at the end of the round, the founders and the existing investors have lost, so to speak, 20%. Simon asks 10% ownership at IPO exit or 10% at current round. This is the current round, after the current round. Good question. Thank you. So this is what the VCs want here on the right. If you now continue to the left, to the founders want money, right? They need to build their business. So they say, hey, I need money for 18 months. And something that I did in my time in ZenJob, we always try to keep 50% plus one shares of the voting shares as long as possible to maintain control over the business. So you have some forcing functions here for the founders as well. And now, in terms of the valuation itself, it's actually really difficult, especially the early stages, because you have comparative benchmarks and some kind of metrics maybe. And later on, you can maybe use a discounted cash flow. And so discounted cash flow is just looking at how much profit can a company create over time, and taking that profit and taking out the amount of having money today versus money in the future is better today than in the future with the weighted cost of capital. So you see already, only if you're profitable really and you generate profits, you can use this kind of discounted cash flow method, in my understanding. So in the beginning, especially like as a seed or Series A investor, there isn't really much that you can compare yourself to, and most startups ideally are quite unique and different, right? So what that means though, this is a mathematical relationship, right? So if the founder needs 500K because she wants to run her business for 18 months and the VC needs 20%, then the valuation is predetermined, because that 500K that the investor sends to the founder needs to represent 20% of the business after the round. That's why post-money valuation. So if a founder goes to a VC and says, hey, I need 500K, and the founder the VC has this traditional mindset that he or she wants to have 20% for that investment amount, then the valuation is already fixed. So it's important so what I tell founders, like when you go to talk to VCs, be careful what you ask for, because if you ask for 500K, it could be that the VC implicitly assumes that is the valuation of 2 million pre and 2.5 million post. So the amount of fuel that you put into the startup has a direct relationship to the valuation. If your 20% is kind of fixed. Let me see, there's a question here. If 10 investors are involved in a round because it's good, how can okay, so this is the 20 to 25% would be per round as a group of investors. So maybe you have a lead investor that takes half the round and the others are maybe smaller investors or angel investors. So they would share the 20 to 25%. Maybe one more point about this 20 to 25%. There's no real rule for that, right? Except that I believe when you do 20% rounds again and again and again and again, you end up with what is the acceptable level of founder incentivization at IPO stage. So, you can play that 20%, adding 20% of shares a couple of times, and it doesn't decrease the founder equity too fast. That's why it's not 30%. If it's 30% every time, it goes down for the founders even faster. And I guess if it's smaller than that, you have the issue that the VC economics don't work out so well anymore. Gina asks, does it create a gap in capital availability for companies that don't need as much money? That's a really interesting and good question. So I would say that two points to caveat this whole slide. This is an equity round, right? So there's often a convertible note, a SAFE or KISS, what YC, for example, use at a demo day, is something that is not a priced round usually, which means that this whole idea of, this thing needs to work out is not as much and not as important as it is when you do a priced round. And the other thing I would say is that if founders don't need as much money, then maybe they can negotiate with the VC and say, hey, look, I'm super hot, super fast growing business. I don't need that much money, but you really want to be on board, dear VC. So then maybe the VC reduces his or her requirement of 20 to 10%. But again, at the end of the day, the VC economics don't work out for the fund if you constantly buy small chunks of equity instead of the one that is appropriate for your stage, and so forth. I hope that kind of answered the question. But in a way, what I've heard is that only when startups are really hot in terms of everyone wants to invest, then they can, of course, go away from this 20% rule. But if you are like many startups, you're an average, well-growing company that is talking to a bunch of different funds, I think usually it ends up at around this kind of level. Awesome. Oh, there's another question. With very early stage companies, does this equation related less to the business plan, and would sellers look to build a business plan with the current available? Okay, we answer this question on the next page. So what I really like is this idea called phase thinking. And that means, again, as a founder, when you pitch a VC, when you want to raise a seed round, yeah, you wouldn't just talk about the seed round. I think the smartest founders or VCs on the receiving end would look for understanding within the founding team what the A round would look like. So let's say you are a seed VC specialist and you put money mostly into seed stage companies, and we can debate what seed really means these days. Then it's actually quite important for you to understand the Series A market quite well too. And why is that? Well, because at the end of the day, you just help the company go to the next stage. And then your hands are tied. So if you see VC, you can provide the money to go until the next fuel station when they need to refuel with more money, the Series A round. But you probably do not have enough money to do the Series A round, because usually as a seed VC, you're focused on the seed stage and you have money for the seed stage, and then you have a little bit more to double down on your winners, maybe pro rata, but you could not lead the round normally, right? There's exceptions with funds that have sort of a multi-stage approach, but most funds that are focused on a certain approach, again, because of the VC economics, they have to focus on a stage. I hope that was what the previous speaker said about that. You need to, as a founder, you need to know who's going to be the investor after your current round. And as a VC, it's even more important to know this. So why do I say all of this? Because I've been in situations where the VCs I was pitching to were asking, hey, but do you know what it takes to find the next big fund to pay for your Series A when I was raising the seed round? And that made me realize that VCs, the only way that your investment will work if you're an early stage investor is if you find a later stage investor to put much more money than you did. So the better you can create confidence that with however much money the founder is raising right now, she can get to the next stage, the better you can sleep at night. And so the idea, for founders is to really think about this whole thing when they go fundraising as a big journey of steps. You fuel a little bit of angel money. With that angel money, you get to your seed round. Then you raise seed money, and with that you get to your A round, and so forth. And the more you can communicate as a founder that you already know what the next stage looks like, the more you as VCs can relax and chill, because you don't need to worry that, what if I just give these guys $2 million and then they build product, but they don't actually reach the stage that Series A companies Series A investors in the space are looking for, then your investment is most likely going to die. And you definitely want to avoid that. So these are just some numbers that I did some research like 6 years ago on how big the fundraising round size changes between angel seed and so forth. So you can see in the beginning, it's a little bit of a bigger jump, and then it always ends up being like a 4x between the rounds and 15 months between those rounds. And so what does this mean now? When you as a VC are talking to a founder, what I recommend you is to check whether the founder can clearly articulate what they have done with the money that they received so far. And if they're bootstrapped, what with the time and the sort of sweat equity. So ideally you hear things like validated, proven. So you want to understand what questions they have already solved before you even get involved, and how capital efficient they are in using that existing money. If they raise 500K and they don't even launch an app, and you know that in that space, in that category, in that sector, you should be able to launch an app with that kind of money, your alarm bells should go off. And so founders like to talk about how much they've validated and proven with the money so far. And of course, the idea is that you learn as much as you can for the next phase. Yeah. So as a VC, I would also look for, have the founding team really build a playbook already? Can they explain how they're going to take the money and really grow? All these questions. We don't have time to go into the whole analyzing an investment thing today, but I think the the key insight that I really like is that the money that they take from you today, together with the other investors, needs to be enough to fly the plane to the next fuel station. You don't want to put too much fuel in the plane because the plane gets heavier. So if you raise too much to reach the goalpost of being a Series A company, you're probably going to spend too much money on stuff that you don't need, and you're probably going to have an issue as a result. So you want to fuel just as much as you need to get to the point where you need to go. And this is something that I used also as a negotiation technique with founders when I was a VC. So when the founder wanted a big valuation, sorry. When founders and the fund that I worked for couldn't agree on the valuation, sometimes we could reduce the round size because we realized, hey, we don't actually need that much money right now, and it's better to raise a little bit less now, which means the dilution, the ownership that the VC takes, is kind of what makes sense for the VC. But the founder can use the momentum to build more product and improve their metrics, so that then they can raise an even bigger round later on. Now, how do you know what the next stage looks like? It's a difficult question. There are some of these funding napkins from Point 9, and I tell founders to ask investors, hey, you said no, it's too early. Like, when is not too early? Like, these kind of questions. So as you network with other VCs, I also recommend you start figuring out at what revenue level is this lady interested in investing. At what profitability or product market fit level is that guy looking to invest with this seed fund, so that you can build a mental image of when a founder comes to you and wants to raise a certain amount, you have a clear picture and you can sort of reality check their plan of how much they need to get to the next level to be attractive for the next big investor type of fish, and not sort of run out of fuel in the meantime. Okay. Okay, one question here is, can you repeat why it is important to have multiple other investors and just being the sole seed investor is an issue? Hopefully I didn't say that. I think some people believe that the best VCs out there take bold bets that are contrarian. So if you're the only person believing in a company's success and you write the entire check for the seed round, then if they go become a unicorn, you'll be handsomely rewarded. Of course, my personal experience from being a VC is that it's very much a herd animal game. So when I was pitching a company to my bosses, and a week later, turns out that another fund that we really liked didn't want to do the deal anymore, or pulled out of the kind of this process, then often my partners were like, okay, fine, let's not do it. So unfortunately, there's a bit of a sort of group think mentality sometimes. I think the best VCs can build conviction for what they want to do without waiting for the rest. But at the same time, I think, unless you have the best network in the world and you know everyone, then I think there's a value add in kind of having multiple people at the table to be able to support the team and to support the founders and make introductions to later stage investors, etc. So, I really personally like the fact that it was a collaborative game, the early stage investing game that I did in London and Berlin, and people generally want to work together. So I think that's also important. Like, if you have a really cool company that you find, it's nice to invite another fund to do the deal together. Because then hopefully they will also invite you the next time they do a cool deal and you need a co-investor. Hope that answers the question. How do you ensure you don't end up with next to nothing as a result of dilution as a VC if you invest at seed stage and the company goes into Series D? Well, that's maybe I press this button. Yeah. So that's a good question. That's why as a VC, if you invest early, you need to think about how much percentage in the company you need to buy for it to make sense for you. And if you kind of model in 3-4 more rounds after your investment and you don't reinvest your pro rata, and we can talk about this in the cap table, then you end up with potentially too little of the cake to make it worth your while. So yeah, you need to understand that either you continue to reinvest a little bit of money to keep your percentage as high as possible, or you potentially run into a situation where you don't have much benefit. What would be your advice regarding language to make VCs comfortable, since the model is not proven at that stage and very few metrics actually available? So this, I think, is question asked from the founder perspective. So exactly at the bottom right here, I tell founders to speak how much you've validated, how much you've proven, how much you've sort of learned with interacting with customers to really build your playbook to grow the business. And for the growth playbook, you usually need money, either hiring people or paying for marketing, etc. And that is the money that you raise. And I don't have the slide with me now, but I really like this trick that another VC I saw do once, which is, I don't remember if it was a he or she, but let's say she would look. So usually VCs ask the team, the founding team, how do you want to use the $2 million that you're raising? And then the founders say, oh, we want to put 500K in our tech team and 1 million in our marketing, whatever it is, right? If you take the amount that they want to use for acquiring customers, for growing, so not the tech team and not the operation stuff, maybe this amount, let's say it's $1 million. If you also know the customer acquisition cost of that business, so you should, as a VC, also ask, hey, what's your CAC, your customer acquisition cost? So it's $200, or let's say $100 per customer. And you can then also ask, what is the revenue that they generate, these kind of customers on average after 1 year? So if you then compare that they want to put $1 million in growth, and you know that one customer costs $100, yeah, that means you have 1 million divided by 100, so 10,000, as the 10,000 customers that you will get with your investment. So if 10,000 customers at the end of the year all spend, let's say, $100 per year in annual recurring revenue, then you would have $1 million in additional revenue. So it's like a puzzle, right? You figure out, is the money that they're allocating towards growth actually enough, given their cost of acquisition and their payback in terms of revenue increase after the initial investment? Does this even work out? Because if the customer, if the founder tells you, hey, with your 1 million of growth investment, we're going to get to 5 million in revenue because this is what all the Series A investors want to see, then you can say, whoa, this makes no sense. The kind of money that you're allocating for growth, combined with your acquisition cost and your payback dynamics, actually only give you about $1 million in revenue additionally. So you're definitely not going to have enough money to reach the Series A point of 5 million in ARR, if that's the case, let's say. So the more you can kind of add these things together, the more smart questions I think you can ask for founders. I hope that I answered this question. If not, maybe you can rephrase it a little bit more in terms of what the very few metrics being available. Okay, follow up on Diana's question. Are there any ways to legally ensure that the percentage of equity won't be diluted in later rounds? That's an interesting question. So I'm taking the founder perspective now, and I would say that makes no sense, my dear VC friend, because you got to pay to play, right? So if you want to not dilute, you need to bring more money. And usually, I think by most legislations that I'm aware of, if you own 7% or let's say 15% in a business, if they do a fundraise, you can invest 15%. The only problem is that you probably don't have enough cash. So what some VCs do is they've set up special purpose vehicles, SPVs, with bigger funds or with high net worth individuals, rich people, etc., to basically do not lose the pro rata. And the pro rata being, if they own 10% of the business and the business does a 100 million fundraise, if you own 10% of the business, you are entitled to put another 10% of the new round, i.e. 10 million of 100 million, into the round to maintain your pro rata. But as I said, most early stage funds don't have that 10 million lying around out of a sudden. So that's why it's a little bit more complicated. In terms of there is a specific thing, Pablo, about when you do convertible loans, some of the accelerators and funds, they actually use a post-money note, which is not just saying, and we can talk about this in the cap table session, but it's not just saying, hey, here's 100K and you convert it into the next round, let's see what happens. But it rather says, here's 100,000 euros. After you do a qualifying round, I will own 7%, period. And that is kind of a way to guarantee your percentage in the current round. And the risk here is that the risk you're protecting yourself against is that if that founder goes to 10 other VCs and gives everyone a convertible loan, then in the actual conversion of the round, you have so many stakeholders that you will have a small piece. That's why some people then put these fixed percentages after the round in the contract so that they know how much they're going to get. We can talk about this in more detail in the cap table session later. So in terms of Tesh's question with very early stage companies, does this equation relate less to the business plan? So I think I'm going to try to answer this question, but I think that the main idea is that if you think you need 500K as a founder, and if you talk to a VC that is probably expecting to have 20% of the round, then your valuation will be 2 million pre and 2.5 million post. And if you're not at 2.5 million, then sorry, the reasons why do you need 500K? Well, there should be a plan that the founders made that shows exactly how, with what they have right now, from here, they get to the metrics required for the next round. And it doesn't have to be that your metrics need to be awesome, but I mean, like I remember some of the funds that I used to talk about this with, they said, we don't look at anything below 1 million in revenue. And that's fine. You can, that's what, I don't know, I guess some growth investors choose as a sort of entry point. Others say, hey, we need at least, I don't know how many users or whatever. But the more you know kind of what is the next level, you can figure out your plan of how to get there. And I guess kind of cycling back all the way to the beginning, startups are about growth. So it's all about how fast can you grow, and you giving founders money just means you want them to use that money as best as possible to grow as fast and as targeted as possible. And that's why I think it makes sense to think about it in this kind of phase thinking framework, where you already know what you want your metrics to look like by the moment that you raise. Are there any more questions at this point? Can you please type in the chat if I should go slower or okay or faster in terms of speaking speed? So please type in the chat if I should go faster, slower, or okay in terms of speed. Okay, I'll speak a little bit slower, I think. I'm sorry, I'm always very excited and then I talk too fast. Awesome. So just a small one here. The difference between a priced round and a convertible loan round, is that, as we said before, right? The funding in the priced round, everything is fixed. How much money you transfer to the founder, how many shares does the VC or the group of VCs get, and how much is the business worth after the round. That's fixed. In a convertible loan, a note or a convertible, you can also call it, the only thing that is fixed is the amount you give to the founders and some stuff about how to convert it. You do not confirm the valuation and you do not confirm the percentage that the VC gets. When that round happens later on, you take the money that you gave the founder and you pretend you invested in the round at a slightly better term or at a cap valuation level. We will see why this is important in a second. When we do this kind of priced round, you as a VC actually become a shareholder and you get on the cap table. If you are just signing notes, a safe note, a KISS note, etc., you're not actually a shareholder, which means you don't actually have the rights of being a shareholder until it actually converts, which I feel like I heard some stories that this could be a problem sometimes. And yeah, so in the original idea, this was a loan that you give to the company as a VC. You say, hey, let's not talk about post-money valuation and dilution and ownership, etc. Just take the 100,000 euros, go run, make your business better. And when you raise a round, we take that 100,000 and we add some interest rate, maybe 1 or 2%. So it's maybe 105,000. sorry, more like 102,000, 101,000. And then we pretend we invested in that round, usually at like a discount or at a cap valuation. But today, I think my understanding is, but please talk to one of the legal speakers in this session, in this course. I think that SAFE and KISS are not actual loans anymore. So it's even more, let's say, of a soft agreement. And if you think about it, previously, as a VC, you give $1 million as a note to a founder, they owe you the money. And if you now don't use the loan, you have very little. You are neither own the money, nor are you part of the shareholder setup, in my understanding. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Are there any final questions about the stuff we talked about? So we talked about pre-money, post-money valuation. We talked about the phase thinking of already sort of having the next round in your mind. So you know how much money the founder needs. So she actually makes it to the next round so that you don't leave. Because actually, I didn't say this. What my bosses as a VC were mostly worried about is that the company works. And then at some point, they are not hot enough to raise another round, but they're also running out of money. And then they come back to us and ask for more money. And then you have this very psychologically difficult situation where you kind of don't want to drop the ball and leave them alone. You want to support, but at the same time, it's, very biased. You've already invested $1 million. The metrics are not great. Should you put more money? Like throwing good money after bad money, not being there for the founder. There's a lot of bad things coming out of that situation. So it's much better if you can try to prevent this situation of the company running out of money because they're not ready for the next round yet. And on this note, I'm very grateful for those of you who are still here and not watching the Apple iPhone release event that I think started just now. Okay, let's continue with, there's another question. Could you please explain from a partner perspective how to fix the share? Yeah, we'll get to the share price situation in a little while. Yeah. So why do I even come here and want to talk to you all about cap tables? Yeah? I think some people say that 99% of, I think this advertising of one of those cap table tools says 99% of cap tables are wrong. And you'll probably see soon why, because it's just very easy to make mistakes. And I have to say that, as a VC, I had a lawyer that was working with us a lot. So she was looking at a lot of the documents. But then when I was a founder, I was like, oh my God, I really need to understand this. I'm just literally signing it. And if I don't understand it, wow, who will understand it? So I encourage you to try to get your head around the nitty-gritty details of cap tables, because I think you can help founders when you know how they work and how to maybe spot the mistakes the founders already made in their versions. And of course, you can protect yourself a little bit from a problem later down the line. So in the most simple and easy way, the cap table is a list of the current stakeholders of the business and the percent they own if the company was sold today. So if the company was sold for $100 million, who gets 10%, 15%, 25%? Now, as you can see, when you ask a startup for their cap table, they will only, if they are really by the book, they will just send you a list. Here's 10 names, and here's how many shares they own. This means they own this percentage of the total amount of outstanding shares, the fully diluted ownership. So when we do fundraising, we want a few additional things. We want to see the historical track record of transactions. So we want to see how did it end up getting to this list that it is now. And we want to do, this is why it's called pro forma in my understanding, we want to preview what the cap table will look like with a certain round that, for example, includes me investing $2 million and this other investor investing 500K. What would the world look like in the future? So we simulate the future. And then, of course, as a founder and as a VC, you can use that thing to play around. What would be the best setup? How much should you raise now? What valuation? What will be the share price, etc.? So I think that was a question just now. I'm going to pause here for a second. Any questions? The cap table is, as I said, it's just a list of stakeholders, and that's what it looks like on the left. Yeah, we can put the founders first, the angel investors, and then kind of the later we go in the fundraising journey, the bigger the funds get, and the further down the list they are. And then what we do is we put a section in the spreadsheet for each event of the company, and it starts with the founding stage, and we put one for the angel round, for the seed round. We can do one for the ESOP top up. Talk about this in a bit in more detail. And for example, the Series A round. So this would be a cap table that for a company that is planning to raise a Series A, where kind of this is the current stage here, and then probably they need to do an ESOP top up before they do the Series A. And this is kind of the simulation part that I talked about. Hani asks, could you elaborate on CLNs, the timeline for CLNs and the conversion of real shares at the company? I guess you mean convertible loan note, yeah. Yeah, we will do this in the example when we look at what actually happens with these notes. Yeah, so please bear with me for a couple of minutes. So then, what do we need to do for each round, for each stakeholder? Yeah, it's like a matrix. We want to know how much money did they invest. We want to know how much valuation did they pay, which is kind of the price per share. How many shares will be issued, and how much do they own afterwards? So the second row here is kind of the same thing, right? The valuation with the amount of shares is the price per share, and then you end up with a percentage of shares owned at the end. So before we go into the example spreadsheet, a few other points that I think are important. So usually when we talk about shares, we talk about common shares that the founders have in the beginning of the company. There's like lots of details about, are they issued, are they outstanding, are they legally authorized? In the US, I think you first legally authorize them and then you issue them. There's a key difference between the shares that founders have and the shares that most of the time the investors get. And the difference is they have a preferred treatment. It's what they call preferred shares. Now, what extra rights do we as investors want to ask for? Well, the first one is something like a liquidation preference. If you have time at the end, we can talk about this, but I'm sure someone else in this course is going to go in great detail about how a liquidation preference works, i.e. that you get your money first before other people in the event of an exit of the company. And so the most preferred shares get the money first, which means that the founders sometimes get nothing at all. So you must understand this whole liq pref problem, participating, non-participating, but we don't have time to talk about it now. In terms of the actual shares in the cap table, we don't really distinguish between preferred and common shares, which actually shows a bit of a weakness in the approach, because if you have a high liquidation preference, then it's not just dividing the percentage, like dividing the company proceeds by the percentages, but rather there's additional logic to be thought about. But again, we're not going to talk about this today. Again, we talked about it, yeah, the convertible loan note will only become shares after the conversion. So we're going to model that in the spreadsheet to see what that looks like. Yeah, then you also have the advisors and the employees. And, I've seen people in Germany that give only real proper shares to their employees. Others in Germany, we don't have this normal ESOP setup like in the UK and the US. Others have like these fake share programs that are behaving like one but aren't really one. So it depends where the founder that you want to invest in is located. You need to understand the geography there and how the ESOP and all of that stuff works. Is it a warrant? Is it an option? And the most important thing, and we can talk about this when we look at the example, is that you know how much the founders still have available after you invest, because that's the key number for you as an investor, in my opinion. There's also this point about vesting. So I'm sure you've heard about vesting for founder vesting and for employee share option vesting. And again, that's something that we're not going to take care of in the simple template that I'm going to show you now. But it's something to take into consideration that if you're, for example, advising a founding team where there's one founder that is not really performing, and you look at the cap table, then you need to take into consideration that if that person left they would not receive all of their, well, probably not their unvested shares, which means that the cap table looks quite different as a result. But what we do now is we want to look at the fully diluted percentage, which is essentially saying, let's take all the shares that are outstanding and add them up together. And then we know if I own 10 of those shares, I know X% of the fully diluted share count. And the important part here is that this includes things that you've promised to employees. Yeah? So if you have, if the founder that you want to invest in has made some verbal agreements with the engineer, hey, you're going to get 1%, etc., 100 shares, then this needs to be taken care of in our cap table. So one question that I would ask usually is, as an investor, is, hey, you know, like, did you make any verbal agreements that are not captured in the documents that we're looking at here? And if yes, then that's already the first mistake. That is, if it's not correctly shown in the cap table. So this is what it looks like when it's finished. So let me put this in the chat here. So you can see exactly what I'm doing if you click on this link. For that, let's swoop over to the template here. So can you see the spreadsheet? Can you maybe type yes in the chat, please, if you can see it? Awesome, perfect. So now, can you please, well, we need 3 founder names. So I think we already have 3 names here, which is perfect. We're going to take Alba, Bola, and Alex. Oops. So let's say these are the founders. So we say founders here. And we say, in Germany, we have 25,000 shares at founding. Oh yeah, thanks for the question about zooming in. That's a good idea. So, so the idea here is that the first thing that, remember, if you go back here, the first thing we want to do is we want to put the founding stage of the business. Yeah. So we're gonna here say founding stage, and we're gonna take the 1st of Jan 2018. And then we're gonna say, let's say an American company that has, I think, usually 10 million shares. So let's say Alba has 330,000. And then, and here we can sum over this. And then, of course, we want to make the numbers here. So here, let's put the number of shares. So what we have now is we have 3 founders, Alba, Bola, and Alex, who have 3.3 million, 3.3 million, and 3.4 million shares. And that means total of 10 million outstanding shares. And now we can do the fully diluted percentage. And we can basically say this divided by this. And we're going to use the $ here to fix the row. So we can pull this down and turn this also into a percentage here. And we can also do another check here to make sure that this, so this is the cap table at founding stage, 1st of January 2018. Yeah. Now it's a little bit difficult to do this interactively, but why would I have the 00 here? Can we have half shares? Can you please type in the chat? Can we issue half shares? So is it possible for someone to have like this? Exactly, we can't. Good point. So what I like to do is I like to keep the decimals here like this so that we can maybe see a mistake later on if you have one. All right, so this is already the end of the cap table, the first version, right? So let's look back here. The next thing we want to do is the first fundraising event, the angel round. So we can put here maybe angel round, and let's say that was on 14th of September 2018. So exactly 3 years ago. Now, let's go back to what we need to put here, right? So we said here that for each round and each stakeholder, we want to know how much they invest. Yeah. So the first thing we can put here is the investment amount. Investment in euro. Oops. Sorry. Okay, then I'm going to put dollars. For some reason, my euro sign is not working. Let's clean up this. So, so we need the amount that they invest, and we then, what else do we need? Valuation and share price. Okay, issued shares. So let's already put some investors here. Yeah, and let's see. We have some other names here. We have Gina. Oops. Let's freeze this on one column, so we can do like this, and let's also freeze on 2 rows, so we can do like this. And now we're gonna say Gina and Simon and Tesh are gonna angel invest. So how much are they gonna put? Let's say 40K. Sorry, it's a small angel investor, $25,000, $10,000, oops, and $30,000. So the first thing we can do here is we can also fix the currency so that it's clear that it's a $25,000 thing. Now, if you come back here, we want to know how many shares they're going to get for that, right? So we need to know, we need to divide this number by the share price. But what is the share price? Can anyone tell me what's the share price? Yeah, Simon, it's not set. Why is it not set? It depends on the pre-money valuation. And now we come back to this game of before and after the round, right? So if these 3 angel investors, Gina, Simon, and Tesh, if they've negotiated with the founder that the business is worth 1 million, then we can start to work our way towards it. Now, if the business is worth 1 million before the round, how much is 1 share? What should I divide it by? So Gina says 10p, but what should I divide by what? Exactly. Thank you, Jemima. So basically, we want to divide the pre-money valuation divided by the last, the outstanding shares. 1 million divided by 10 million, exactly. Sorry. Sorry for my cough. So we can also bring this formula here, and we can just paste special just the formula, so we keep the formatting. Now, basically, we say that there's $65,000 being invested here. So we can also do the post money. And that would basically just be the pre-money plus the post money. Simple, not that exciting. Now, the most important part now is the new issued shares. Yeah. So how many shares does Alba get? Can someone type in the chat? How many shares does she get? Exactly, she gets 0. So unless she invests, and I assume Alba is a woman here. I've worked with a male Alba before, so I hope I'm not mixing this up. But if the founders don't invest money, they don't get any more shares. So the issued shares is 0. Yeah. And then maybe we call this total shares or something. That would be how much they had before plus how much they receive now. So it's sad to see that the founders have basically the same amount of shares as before, but that's normal, right? They're not investing more into the business 95% of the time. What about the investors though? The investors need to receive shares because they're giving us money. So what do we do now? What should I divide by what? We know that Gina gave $25,000 and we know that the price per share is 10 cents. What should we do? Exactly. We're going to divide this by that. And again, we want to lock the 22 so that when we move this formula up and down, it's not going to mess up. And then we can take the same formatting as here, take it with this funny thing and put it here. Put it here. And we can also take this thing here. And now we already see something interesting, right? We see that the company now has added 650,000 shares, which means the total outstanding share count is now, actually let's copy paste this over here, is now not 10 million, but 10.65 million. Yeah. And of course, if you multiply the 10 cent into this, it becomes the same pre and post money valuation. Yeah. Now we want to also copy paste this here. And we say, what's the fully diluted ownership? Well, it's this, and then we have to move this also here. And then we see, okay, cool. This actually sums up to 100%. So we're not making any obvious mistakes here. The question now is, the founders went from 33% Alba, he went to 30.99%. So this is what I talk about with the dilution. Yeah. So all the founders together here, they went from 100% to 93.9%. And 100 minus 93.90 is the same as 6.10%. So the dilution in this round, the ownership that the investors took or gained was combined 6.1%. And here it also seems fine in terms of the, now just for the argument's sake, let's actually change this to a German company where we have 25,000 shares at founding. So let's say we have 5,000. So in Germany, all those companies, when they start, have 25,000 shares. Okay, it's not doing what I wanted to do. Basically, let me see if I can change this a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Now we see it. So let's say the amount of shares that you have in the beginning are a bit of an uneven number. Then what happens here is a problem, because now we're saying that Gina gets 0.33 shares. What should we do now in order to fix this problem? How can we fix this formula here? Yeah, perfect. Round down. So I think in my understanding, it's usually that people round down by 0 decimals. And then what they do is they actually asked the VC to only invest, in this case, 600 blah, blah, blah times that. So the VC will not transfer $25,000, but actually only 24,987, etc., to fix for this problem. Okay, let's put this back because now we fixed the formula with the round down and we don't need to worry about these uneven share numbers here. All right, so and again, why do we round down? Because otherwise they need to pay more money. If you round up, you need to receive more money from the investor, which is also fine. But I guess normally you want to kind of have a little, like, rather one share less than one share more. Okay, now we've done the angel round. Let's do one more round. The cool thing now is we can basically just copy paste this here and copy it over here, and then we can delete this. We can have other investors. So we have Jemima Ventures. And Jemima Ventures is putting in $1 million. Let's go big. Yeah. So of course we need to adjust the pre-money valuation, because if we do this here and we leave the pre-money valuation at 1 million, then essentially she owns 50% with her fund after the round. That makes no sense. So now we can go and we can change this to, let's say, 4 million. And then Jemima Ventures gets exactly the 20% that we were talking about for 1 + 4, 5 million post money on this. Now, one interesting thing here is you see we talked about dilution and how can you guarantee what's going on. So of course, Gina owns 2.35% as an angel. She could, in theory, put 2.35% of that round. So if she does 2.35% times, what is it? 1 million. That would be $23,000. And then this year would not be 1 million, but this minus this. So if basically Gina says, I want to invest my pro rata, and then she would be able to maintain her shares. But as you see, the first time she invested was $25,000. She needs the same amount of money just to maintain her shares. That's why most investors, maybe they say, okay, I'm going to put another 5K just to have a little bit, instead of having 1.88%, I'm going to get 1.98%, because when it's a unicorn, of course, that makes significant difference. But let's say those two angel investors do not reinvest. So you see they're already going down to very, very, very insignificant amounts of equity ownership. But of course, that 0.75% is actually a lot of money, because it's basically, let's put this down here, of 5 million post money valuation. If you own 0. So the initial investment that was worth $10,000 is already worth $37,000 now. Put this over here. So here, the 0.94% that Simon invested were worth only 10K. That's why he put 10K. Now they're already worth 4x that. So even though the percentage goes down, the paper value of those shares goes up. Now there's a question: how did the price per share go up to 40 to 150? So I think before the share price was like this. Oops, sorry. So the share price, and actually this is a good point that you said this. Thank you for asking. So this formula, we need to check that it pulls from the right fully diluted amount of shares. Yeah? So we take the current pre-money valuation. This would be here 1 million now. Actually, we need to change this to seed round. And then we won't have the same valuation, right? That'd be almost a down round. So let's say it's a 4 million valuation. And then we need to make sure that the share price is calculated based on the new pre-money divided by the last outstanding number of shares here, this one. And, you know, because you can copy paste the sheet, it just works without you need to really worrying about it. And so so I think someone had a question earlier, how do you determine the share price? Well, the share price is totally unimportant for you, in the sense that all that matters is how many shares outstanding before the round and what's the pre-money valuation that you determine. That function determines the price per share. But if this number was higher, then the share price would be lower, and that's fine. Then you just get more shares, but you still own the same percent at the end of the day. I hope that answers Simon's question. Okay, now there's more questions here. So the first question here from sorry, from Alex: if some angels invest alongside VCs in the same round, do they get exactly the same valuation for the startup? Is it advantage or disadvantage for angels? So I'm not sure about. I think there's a thing called the most favored nation, which I think most investors put in the documents, which says that if anyone else in this round gets a better deal than me, I need to get that deal. So my understanding, 99% of the time, all the investors who invest at the same time have the same deal, because if you don't, you're probably going to have some issues afterwards. Now, you can do these things with side letters, where you agree certain additional things, which I think do not show up in the main investment documentation. So there you could, in theory, do funny other things, like maybe agree a different pro rata. So one thing that I learned, which was very unusual for me, when I was fundraising as a CEO, we had one fund that said, hey, we like you so much. We would love to do in the term sheet that they wanted to put, they wanted an extra pro rata for the next round. And they said, yeah, we are so excited about this business. We want to put even more money in the next round. And then our existing investor said, hey, Stefan, like, why would you give them the right to invest more the next round? They should get the same amount of right to invest as they buy now. If they're really excited about the business, they should invest more now. Then they have more right to buy more later. But if they are a bit cautious now, but they want the right to invest more later, that's actually bad for you as a founder. So kind of giving some investor extra rights on the side is usually a bit tricky. And I would probably, I don't know if it happens a lot. It didn't really happen when I was working as an investor. It was usually that everyone got the same deal. But I'm sure it, when you have a corporate investor, for example, you may have an additional kind of corporate deal with what the corporate needs to do for the startup. Maybe they need to buy a certain amount of services or stuff like that. And then you have side letters, and then you essentially have a different economic setup for different people. So everyone gets the same valuation except those that have a convertible loan. And so let's quickly do this here. Actually, let's say that here is Future Ventures. Future Ventures put a $100,000 convertible loan before the seed round. Now, the question is, how do we turn $100,000 into shares? And also, this is kind of funny, right? Because we don't actually receive 100,000 here. We only receive 1 million. Only this is the new money in the company. So this money has already been transferred, let's say, a couple of months before September, because the convertible loan amount usually gets sent like 5, 6, 10 months before the round actually happens. So it's a bit tricky here. So what I like to do is I like to make this a yellow cell to indicate that there's something funny is happening here. And then maybe we can put into the note here, 100K, 20% discount. Yeah. So, or 3 million cap. So let's say the Future Ventures has agreed a deal with the founders that they will invest 100K as a convertible loan well before this round happens, but at a 20% discount or 3 million cap, which means the maximum valuation they will pay is 3 million. So what we need to do now is we need to basically say, well, this is why we hard code this formula here. We say $100,000 gets divided by 150. That's the formula for everyone else, right? We just divide the amount that gets invested. Sorry, this is easy to read. We get the amount that gets invested divided by the share price, and we round it down. But here we need to do a little bit more, right? So let's first of all copy this formula down so we have the rounding thing correct. So it's not 100,000 that we divide by the 50, but here, right? And if we have a discount, yeah, we could say that actually it's not 100,000 that we're gonna do, but if if we, sorry. Let's take this out here. So if it's a, so that's actually wrong. We should put a divide 0.8. Yeah, so if you have a 20% discount, actually my brain is a little bit confused right now if this is the right way to do it, but when you look at the, actually let's go here, so 1 second. So here's the final version. So here you can see we can put the name of the node and we can put the details here. And then what we do here is we divide the amount that we invest by the discount. So we divide by 0.8. That means the money that we convert actually gets more. Yeah. So instead of converting 100K, we have 125K. And that is the new amount that we divide by the share price. Yeah. Or what you could do is you could, of course, also put this here. You could put, I'm sorry, what I said before was wrong. The clean way to do this is to say, if you get a 20% discount, that means you take the share price here and you multiply it by 80%. So you get a lower share price and you divide the original amount, 100,000 divided by the lower share price, 832. So if you change the discount back to 1 here, so there's no discount, they get 665 or 832. So it's a significant amount of difference in the amount of shares somebody gets because they have this discount here. Of course, you could also have a cap, which means that you say, well, the maximum amount that I'm going to pay is if this number is 3 million. So what that means here is we're going to say 3 million divided by the same outstanding amount of shares. So the share price that this investor gets is 112 instead of 150. And then, so depending on the convertible loan, there's a contract which says exactly how to calculate this here. There will be literally a formula in the document that says we take the amount, like it's literally a formula in the mathematical formula. And usually what they do is they have something like this, like a maximum. So whichever one is larger of either the 80% discount or the $100,000 with, and then we take this cap. Oops. So, and so what this one says now, it's a bit complicated. It says the investor will get either the amount of shares that are more from the discount or from the cap. And anyway, I'm going into too much detail here, I think. The convertible is something that in this manual document, you need to do manually. Yeah. And then, of course, let's just add this also here. So that means they have 2.6%. Now, if this convertible was actually something where they say, after I spoke about the post-money note convertibles, sometimes the investor says, hey, I want 3% after the round. And then what you need to do is either use goal-seek function in Excel, but I would recommend against Excel because then you have no version control of your files. And here, you basically need to play around with this. When this reaches 3%. And you see, this is now a really manual exercise in the sense that depending on how much these people invest, so let's say this person here puts 1.5 million, you see the same amount of shares is not enough anymore to get 3%. So then you need to start adjusting even after these other things get fixed. Let's see. How do you fix the pre-money valuation for the first round before any investment happens? You don't need to have a valuation here because here you just, I mean, in Germany, for example, one share is worth €1. So in the beginning, the company is worth 25,000 euros. But that's kind of a joke. And as soon as you issue new shares, i.e. like this, you need to agree at what price you issue them. And that price is the pre-money valuation that you agree divided by those existing shares. Because then you have one piece of the company is worth however much the new investors needs to pay. And exactly, and we have slightly differential share prices for convertible holders. If we undo this change here, so we have this formula again where that this formula gets calculated automatically based on what a convertible loan looks like. And then the convertible loan holders in the round get a better deal than the other investors, but that's because they've invested the money much earlier than the rest of the investors in this round. And just because we're running out of time, the ESOP, let's look at it in this final version here. It's a bit easier. So basically the ESOP essentially is like an investor. So you can include it here. I've done it so that when you hide this here in the final template, that you don't double count this here down. Yeah. So the ESOP creation part here is essentially like giving a new shareholder shares, but without receiving money for it, which is why it feels like dilution to everyone. So and this is what most VCs that I know say, they say, hey, when I invest in your business at a Series A, I want you to have 8%, 7%, whatever, 6% of available ESOP to give to new management hires. So how much do you have now? So you can ask the founders, hey, how much ESOP do you have at the moment? And then the founder will say, I have 11%. And then you say, no, I don't care how much ESOP you have generated, but the question is how much is allocated here versus unallocated. So that's why in this model here, we've split out and said, hey, this is how much we've allocated. This means this much is how much we've left. Now, in order to have 8% of unallocated ESOP after the round here at the end, this is how many shares you need to issue here. So if you put this down to, the 5 million, yeah, you only have 5.7 after the round. So let's undo this to go back to the number that is close to 8%. Now, the game that some investors play here is that they say, hey, I will give you an 8 million pre-money valuation, but I need 8% of ESOP after the round, which in effect means that you ask the founder to create 11% worth of ESOP before the Series A. So the company is just a seed company at this point, right? And before they can even do this step of adding the shares here, blah, 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 that we talked about, they first need to do another round, minus receiving any money here, where all they do is they issue new employee shares, which means there's this pool of 11.81% of shares that hurts everyone else by those 11.81%. And so the investor doesn't want to, when they invest here, the Series A VC3, they don't want to get hit by this 11% dilution. So they say, hey, I'm only going to invest the money if the company is in such a shape that after the round, there's 8% of unallocated ESOP left. And of course, this is essentially like changing the valuation by 11, 12%. Because if you don't do this, then if you have to create these ESOP shares before, you see the founders go from 29 to 25%. So it's a significant change just because this ESOP has to be created. And as a VC, you want to watch out for creating this ESOP ideally before you join the party, because as soon as you join the party, the founders could have also negotiated here and said, hey, look, we don't need this ESOP. We are such a hot company. If you want to invest, do it or go away. Then the VC would invest here, 2 million. And then afterwards, this step here happens one to the right on the other side here. And then this new fund gets diluted already as well. So just like the previous investors went from 19 to 16% because of this ESOP, this investor would then also dilute with everyone else. So that's why investors usually try to have the ESOP creation happening before they invest. And many founders don't understand that talking about a certain amount of ESOP being free is the same as talking about valuation at the end of the day. All right, let me see if there's any other questions here. Why does the convertible loan get sent before the investment loan happens? Well, the idea of a convertible loan is that you send the money quickly without doing all the paperwork and the lawyer stuff. So normally the idea is that if you agree to do a note with a founder, you send in the money and you sign the paperwork that if there's a qualifying round, blah, 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 at certain cap, blah, 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 then this and this is the way the the convertible loan converts into shares. But the idea is that you send the money right away, so the founders can work with their business with the money. And then when the round actually happens, then you get the real shares and all of that. And as I said, in the preferred share stuff, the convertible loan holder is not a shareholder the moment they send the money, only when the round happens and they convert their loan or their fake loan into shares, which means if the company has something to approve or if there's any legal questions, the convertible loan holders, in my understanding, have nothing to say. That's why as a VC, you want to be careful not just to be exposed to companies with a convertible loan, because until you actually convert them into shares, you have no information rights and you have no real exposure to the business. Okay, so I think we talked about the ESOP round. There's another question. In cases where you have entrepreneurs that give equity to employees as a retainer, how problematic does it become for subsequent fundraising? Can you imagine that if these employees don't constantly reinvest, there would be minority shareholders, and I'm curious if you've seen different about that. No, so that's a good question. The usual understanding is that when you have these employee share options here, that those people cannot reinvest. And especially when we talk not about shares, but share options, which is just an option, the right to buy a share later on. That just means that the moment the company goes public or gets sold, you have the right to buy 500 pieces, whatever, worth of shares. And there's a strike price and a sale price, and then you already immediately make some money, etc. It depends on the details of the thing. But in my understanding, it's not expected by VCs that employees reinvest money. But the idea is that you give them shares once and you vest them so that you don't give them all the shares on day one. And then you wait until there's an exit event where you convert those options into real shares, and then they can sell them right away. There was one other point I wanted to make. Yeah, so the great question, Pablo. Are there any notable examples of founders who kept on investing throughout various rounds? This is what I wanted to say. So usually you give equity once, and then you give more shares later on, right? So you can continuously keep your employees excited about a business by giving them more shares later on as a founder. But also keep in mind that the value of those shares gets much bigger because the share price increases, right? If you go back to our other example here, the share price goes from 40 to 150 and so forth. So the more that share price rises, the more money those options or shares are worth, so the more rich they become. It's a good question, Pablo, about do founders invest? Usually, they invest a little bit in the beginning, maybe, but usually it's also that the money is the kind of money that you need once things become successful is so much that most founders don't have it. So I don't have any examples or cool stories about this, unfortunately, but it's a great question. Maybe you can ask some of the other VCs that have some stories about this. All right. Cool. So I'm going to put this over here. You can make your own copy of this sheet. Just don't ask to edit, but please first top here, make a copy, and then you can play around with it. There's also some stuff at the bottom here, which is maybe interesting. So here it sums together all the, it sums together, this is easier to read, all the shares of the angels. So you see the percentage of different shareholder groups of how much they own in the business and everything. And the last thing to say here is these dates are important, right? So as a VC, I would always go and say, hey, let me look at the dates during which you fundraised, and let me, again, with the phase staking that we talked about, let me see if that makes sense. Can the valuation increase by 3 in just 6 months? So if the dates between founding and angel round, maybe between angel round and seed round is only a few months, and the valuation goes up by a factor 5, that's weird. So you can look at how the dates end up telling a compelling story or not. Okay, I'm going to share this link one more time here, so not fast. Okay, so this is just a zoomed out version of it. Yeah, you have the different angel round, seed round, ESOP top-up Series A round. As I said, remember that the ESOP top-up is something that you typically negotiate with the founders. When you do that, do you do it before you invest or do you do it after you invest? And the difference is, do you get hit by those 10% here, or do the people that before you invested get hit by those 10%? Now, when you take a cap table of a founder or you look at one, I would check for the following things. I would look at, do these, as I just said, right? Do these historical dates and valuations tell a compelling story? So valuation going up, or is it like weird? Is it flat, or is it even going down? This is what VCs that I know usually look for. Yeah, you could also like dig a bit deeper as a VC and ask, hey, are these people, like, is there an early co-founder that we are hiding in the ESOP, or the link, Diana, is in the chat. So, you know, if the ESOP pool is particularly large, you may ask, hey, who's actually an ESOP holder here? Is there also advisors, or is it just the team members? Yeah, as I said, it's really, really important that all the shares are accounted for, because if here, imagine you have someone that has 100 shares that you promised them, that changes everyone else's percentage. So if someone suddenly sues you and says, hey, I have proof that you owe me 100 shares at this stage, that screws it up for everyone else. So you need to really make sure that founders put all the things that they have promised or given to people into that cap table. Yeah, if you have multiple nodes, you need to be careful how to calculate the exact effect of it, which you just did, right? Yeah, and you know, some people literally send captable.xlsx, but of course we want something like 2020 blah 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 blah, the version, if it's an Excel file. And another thing that founders sometimes get wrong is they talk to their employees about percentages. And as you can see here, it's not really about the percentages, it's about the number of shares or share options that you hold. So again, when you talk to a founder and he or she talks a lot about, oh, I've given this person 3%, it's kind of not correct. It's actually more accurate to say I've given this person 100 shares, which is equivalent currently to 0.29%. But if you think about it, those 250 shares that you gave to someone here were 0.94% here, but now the same 250 shares are only 0.73%. So again, it's a game that some people play to trick people into telling them, hey, you get 1% at the beginning versus 1% now. Because as you can see, right, 1% here versus there in the beginning makes a big difference. Oops. Right. Any more questions? This is just a list of some of the tools. I think Carta and Ledgy just raised a lot of money, I think, in Europe. And I think Capdesk is also in Europe. Carta is the big one from the US that is apparently expensive after a while, but CapTable was always free. Honestly, I have not used any of them in a lot of depth. I think the standard and status quo today is to manage your cap table with one of those tools, because this is super easy to make mistakes. But I think that as a future VC, you absolutely need to understand how this stuff works, so that, you know, it's not unclear to you how a conversion event of a convertible loan note actually happens. But, you know, I would probably recommend founders to use one of those tools to keep a really solid track of who owns what and all the address management, etc. Because there's a lot of administrative things also that go beyond knowing what percentages someone owns, but like what their current address is, if they've signed certain paperwork, etc. And I think these tools make that easier for you. Anyone want to share any other experiences with these? I was hoping we could do a bit of a Q&A, but I think it's difficult with the format, and also we are already like a little bit over the end of the time. So as we wrap up, I would love to have all of you, sorry, I would love to have all of you share feedback. Join the Innovators Room Slack if you like. It's free to join. And I would also really appreciate if you could all leave one thing that was new for you today, or something that makes you think you've learned something in the chat before we say goodbye. And of course, I'm around for a couple more minutes. If you have more questions, please answer them now, ask them now. And before you leave, please leave a message in the chat with one thing that you take away from today's session that will be useful for you in the future. And while you do that, I'm going to answer the Bay Area VC question. So yeah, we have quite a few people from the US in it. I think it's 20-30%. So of 800 investors, there's probably something between 50 and 100 American investors in there. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Tej. Awesome. I'm seeing some great learnings coming in. That's exciting. Everybody one learning, please. And then I think we had enough of cap tables for today. Thanks, Viveka. Thanks, Diana. Thanks, Jesus. Thanks, Pablo. Yeah, Alex, that's the sad truth, right? You start with a big piece of the cake and then it just gets smaller over time. Thanks, Valerie. All right, I think it's time to wrap up the session. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Yeah, and we'll send any other pointers or feedback that comes through later. Thanks everyone for joining. All of the links that have been mentioned to the table and anything that's currently on the screen now, that's all also going to be added onto Notion along with the recording. Recordings get added at the end of the week. So next Monday, check back and you'll be able to see this recording and go over all of this again. But it's always at the end of the week that recordings get put up. We have another session on Thursday. That's going to be on market sizing led by Shreya. And I think it's going to be Aman actually who's hosting that one. So you'll get to meet another member of the Future VC team. Other than that, see you all soon. And oh yeah, mental matching will happen this week as well. That's the only other thing to announce. But yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. And thank you everyone for joining. Bye.
Awesome. Best wishes from Berlin. Bye-bye. Take care.